There's war going on in this world. A war on freedom.
He's acting outside of his authority by saying you can't put something that you want in your own body. That's your own personal choice, and can't nobody take that from you, you know?
You're one of these taxpayers, and these are all your documents, and this is how we're going to rob you. It's fucked up, man.
It's more war, it's more spending, it's more debt, and it's less freedom.
We don't do that here.
Some people think that you can't be radical and pragmatic.
This is what we need, is a pragmatic radicalism, not moderation. Hardcore radicalism, but smart shit.
It's not sitting in a fucking basement with a bunch of fucking nerds.
You don't know shit, and that's the thing. You have to talk to people who think differently than you.
Like, his focus is not how horrible the government is, it's how wonderful liberty and freedom are.
That's what drives us.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us.
We're just getting started.
Have I been muted this whole time? I have been. Welcome back, guys. This is Fight for Liberty Live. And technical difficulties and forgetting to unmute are a constant part of the show. So welcome back to that as well. What I was saying, nugofknowledge.com. It's the best place to get all of your premium cannabis needs. We've got vapes, flower, edibles, all sorts of different things. So go on over to that website, use the promo code F4L, and you're going to get 10% off. And also, while you're at it, if you're getting a little high, you can get a little buzz on. Go to bloodoftyrants.wine. It's the same promo code there. It's the same people doing it, and you can get a little bit of wine as well. But without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Reed Coverdale. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you again. Long time no see.
Yeah, lots has happened since you've been on the show.
I'm trying to even remember when I was on the show last. What was it, like last October or something?
Just about. I think it was like 8 months ago.
Yeah,
because I had to look up the last one for just for the number when I was looking up, and yeah, it's been 8 months.
Yeah, much has happened in that time.
Yeah. Let's start out with you're back in New Hampshire. How's that?
It's good, man. I left in 2020, March of 2020, which is kind of a hilarious decision in hindsight. It was March 3rd, so before everything started going insane. But it's been good to be back. You know, I miss the family, and it's nice being in a state where I feel like people share my values for the most part. For those who don't know the story, I moved out to Utah in 2020, and I was driving oversized loads around the southwest, northwest, just western side of the United States. And I realized that the lie that everybody is a libertarian and just doesn't know it yet was complete bullshit. Like that's just not the case. Most people are not libertarian, and they don't want to be. They want to boss other people around, or they want to be told what to do. It's a small minority of people that I think truly are comfortable leaving others alone and just governing themselves. And you know, Utah wasn't that bad. There were lockdown. There weren't really lockdowns. There were like mask mandates and stuff that like 40% of the population adhered to, but they weren't being aggressive in their pushback at all. And there really weren't a lot of states that were. You know, Florida did eventually, and a couple other states, but New Hampshire they've really shown that they want to dismantle the government and be perceived as a threat to the status quo. And the Free State Project in New Hampshire is the only libertarian organization, or it's not really an organization, but the only libertarian movement that's receiving any pushback at all, that's getting any recognition in the media. And it's all negative, which is great. Like, I think negative press about libertarians is good because it means they're actually worried about us. They're not going to give us any favorable coverage because we want to dismantle their power structure. But they've had signs like free staters are an invasive species that needs to be exterminated and stuff like that. So I mean, that's the type of press I want to get about us. And in Utah, they were voting on banning pornography off of mobile devices. And say what you want about porn, but it was just like, why are we focusing on this right now? And also, to do this, you're going to have to give the government a lot of authority in order to know what people are looking at on their phones or whatever. And then around the same time in New Hampshire, they were voting on whether or not they should be allowed to secede from the union. So I was just like, all right, we're not on the same level here. So I moved back, and I think it's been a great decision. I'm glad to be back here.
Yeah, we talk a lot, especially in the liberty movement, but just politics in general, about the idea of like moving states mostly for political reasons. And you just did that. So first question, you kind of just answered. You'd say it's worth it, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I know you just moved too. Like, a lot of us realize that moving is just part of life if you want to be around people who share your values. If that's not something you're willing to do, then you're probably, well, this isn't necessarily true, but let me put it this way. You're more likely to make it where you want in life if you're willing to move. You know, I moved 2 years ago to get a job I really wanted. I've traveled all over the country, been to all 50 states. I've lived in Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, and New Hampshire. And moving is just something that I've been willing to do in order to pursue what I want. And that is part of the American, I don't know, I don't want to say American dream, but like the American essence is like moving west and, you know, finding a new home and starting something new or whatever. So the fact that we've just like kind of given that up and don't do that anymore is part of the reason nobody succeeds anymore. So I think if people really do care about changing culture and investing in a community that shares what you believe, and you're not willing to move out of your high rise in New York or Houston or whatever, then you're probably not going to see it happen. You know, it takes a little bit of initiative on your part as well.
Yeah. I think I like the way you said it. It's kind of like the most American thing is to move. If you don't like where you're at, move. Like all the way back to the fucking Pilgrims and Explorers. Like there's white people here because of that exact kind of mentality. I do wonder if sometimes we, like, as libertarians, throw the idea of moving around like out too much to where, or in a way where it might be more unrealistic for some people than we realize or let on. But I also think that you're making a good point, and that if it's something that actually matters to you, you will figure it out and be where you need to be. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously complications if you have a family or if you have a job that you might not be able to get somewhere else. But let's be real, back in the 1800s, moving was a lot harder than it is now. If you decided, look, I'm just going to move out to Kansas because that sounds interesting, that wasn't just throwing your shit in an SUV and driving west. That was a serious undertaking. Mm-hmm. You know, some of you might die on the way. You're traveling an unknown road to you that isn't very well established. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it's the easiest it's ever been to pick up and move now because of the networking you can do, the people you can find in other states that are going to be willing to help you. Like all that stuff was way harder even just a couple decades ago to figure out. So as far as the logistics of moving go, I don't think it's ever really been easier than it is now. Maybe a couple years ago before all this, all the lockdowns and everything caused the bubble to burst and everything to go crashing down. Maybe it was easier before that. But as far as technology and ease of movement goes, like right now is a lot easier than it's ever been before, basically.
Yeah, I think I came to that realization real hard earlier this year, driving down the Oregon Trail. I'm like, okay, this something very much didn't feel right about like covering most of the distance of the Oregon Trail that took people months and sometimes years to get from one end to the other in like a day and a half. I'm just like, this isn't, this is not what the Oregon Trail was. But yeah, I definitely think that you're right, that we're in a place where if it's something that you really want, you can figure it out. And it's not like you can't still drive back or fly back or stay in touch on fucking Zoom and Facebook and whatnot. Like you can make it work.
100%, yeah.
So many people can have remote jobs to where sticking around where you're at really is pointless. Just make the move.
Yeah, I mean, that point you just made about staying in touch, like back in the 1800s when you moved out to Kansas, it was like goodbye forever, grandma, cousins, uncles, like never see you again. Maybe if the Pony Express gets the mail across, I'll send you a couple letters here and there that you might get if they don't get attacked by bandits or Indians or something. But now you can just like Zoom everybody and you can, like you said, fly back or drive back and visit. It's even if you're in a different country, you can do that now. So there still are excuses, but there are far fewer excuses that really hold water as to why you shouldn't move if it's going to better you.
Yeah. You guys have one Ben Heckman on his way to New Hampshire within the next couple of years as well. I just wish it wasn't such a just godless frozen tundra. If it wasn't that, we've had this
You grew up in upstate New York, though.
I know, and I'm trying to live somewhere where the air doesn't hurt my face.
Yeah, but aren't you in Indiana?
Currently in northern Illinois. Which is,
even worse.
Yeah. But this is temporary, and this is like perfect. I like the north in the fall, and then I'm going to want to go back down south in about a month.
Well, you can do that in New Hampshire. Live in New Hampshire half the year, register to vote and everything there, and then just live in North Carolina the other half of the year or something.
Yeah. I don't know.
There goes that excuse.
Yeah, I don't know if New Hampshire. I'm hoping that New Hampshire isn't the only state in the country that has hope of any kind. I think I might be wrong, but I'm gonna hold out hope for another year or two. We'll see.
I think Maine has hope because we're just gonna have to annex them when we secede. It's like, look, you can't get anywhere else without going through New Hampshire. So you guys are just coming with us. Just accept it. And they've got like 3 moose, a caribou, a couple raccoons, and like 4 people. So they're not really going to have much of a say in the matter.
The caribou might put up a fight. So on the topic of, people moving, you then quite quickly got involved with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which I'm sure for you, it's pretty easy to get involved with things like that. They would have handed you the keys to any Twitter account you wanted. But what was your experience like joining or rejoining, kind of getting back involved with the party up there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm the perfect type of person for that group. I mean, my sense of humor, my persona, all of it is just an easy fit.
Mhm.
And I gotta admit, I didn't know any of those guys before I left New Hampshire. Like even Justin O'Donnell, I didn't know him until after I left New Hampshire because I wasn't involved in the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire. I really wasn't. I had my opinions, but I didn't have a show until May of 2020. And, you know, I'd worked on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, but that was the only campaign I'd ever really worked on. So I met like a couple libertarians here and there because they were involved with that campaign too. But I'd never like campaigned for anyone or worked on any, you know, worked with the Free State Project in any way or the Libertarian Party. So these are all new friendships, but yeah, I mean, most of the people I just completely get along with, and they know my proclivity to evoke reactions with social media. So I'm on their social media team. A lot of people think I like run New Hampshire social media, which isn't true. I just assist. I'm one of the guys who gives input and makes posts occasionally. And yeah, I try to fulfill the position they hired me for.
But not to be mistaken, you did author the tweet that got y'all national recognition a couple.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think
weeks
everybody knows who made that tweet. Like, it wasn't exactly the first time that tweet had been made. It was just the first time an official party account had made it. So.
Right. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
I know that the backlash was pretty much the intention. But like any remorse?
No. Fuck no. Look, I put some friends of mine in a couple tough positions, and I like remorse isn't the right word. It's more like, hey, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Not so much like I wouldn't do that if it were the opportunity again, because I would. I think we got mostly the reaction we were looking for. Let me put it this way. I'm understanding of people who don't like that approach and who just said they don't like that approach. So a lot of people were really upset at Justin Amash, for example, that he told us this is like a disgusting tweet and this is counterproductive and you need to win libertarians over with love and compassion instead of this. And then he also acknowledged that John McCain was a war criminal and a disgusting person or whatever. And to me, that's like, okay, like I don't really have an issue with that. I mean, he just has a difference of opinion on how we should message, but wasn't defending John McCain or Meghan McCain or acting like they were above reproach or something. It was just, hey, this is counterproductive messaging. We saw that from a few people. I don't mind that. Like, that's okay, fine. It was the people who were apologizing to Meghan McCain or were more outraged about the tweet than anything they've ever said about John McCain or Meghan McCain or their war crimes. The people who said we become the same thing we hate when we make tweets like that. I'm sorry, that's a ridiculous comparison. Like we have not bombed any countries or advocated for bombing countries or advocated for occupation or genocide or any of that stuff. I'm sorry, or tried to convince the United States government to sell weapons to terrorist groups in Syria or neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine, like, or bombed Vietnamese children in the Vietnam War, or set a fucking U.S. Navy ship on fire accidentally and killed like 140 people. Like, we haven't done any of those things. So, sorry, we're not the same thing we hate just because, just because every August 25th, from out of the woodwork, you have right and left wing figures come together in a moment of bipartisanship to all, remember the glorious legacy of John McCain and honor him for the decent human being that he was, and say that we should all aspire to be a maverick like he was. It's like, oh yeah, support the wars that the Democrats and the Republicans start. Like how revolutionary and against the grain. And so we made that tweet because if we had just made some tweet saying like John McCain was a despicable war criminal and here's a list of his war crimes or whatever, like wouldn't get any recognition. It might get like 600 likes or something. And a couple people would be like, oh, how dare you say that on the day of his passing or whatever. That tweet, on the other hand, it got like 15 million impressions. As you noted, it ended up in national and international news. It got us trending on Twitter for a whole day, and it brought thousands of people to the conversation. Like, why would you say something so gross and disgusting? And it started a conversation with hundreds and thousands of people in the comments, where there were videos of drone strikes, of the collateral murder video released by WikiLeaks, all bringing attention to all the horrible things that John McCain had done, and then all the warmongering that Meghan McCain has done from The View, normalizing neoconservative policies to middle-aged housewives and soccer moms. In a lot of ways, she's actually more responsible for pushing this message than John McCain was. Like, John McCain, yeah, he voted on this stuff, but he wasn't near the national public figure that Meghan McCain has been in the media on The View. So we got tons of attention. And what was the attention over? Like, oh, the libertarians hate McCain. And why do they hate McCain? Like, most of the articles mentioned how we called him a warmongering piece of shit and how he's like the most disgusting human being on planet Earth, and we're glad he's dead, and fuck his daughter too. Actually on CNN, we got mentioned on CNN, and I went to CNN and typed in libertarian. The last time libertarians got mentioned on CNN was when Justin Amash thought about running for president. So the first press we've gotten in over 2 years, and it was in opposition to warmongers. So I don't know, like,
not a bad reason to get attention.
I think so.
Yeah. I think that I can definitely respect like the Justin Amash or Spike Cohen take here. And I actually like went out of my way to have a couple of conversations with like friends of mine who are very much not involved in the movement or the party at all, but are very interested in it. And kind of to get a more normie perspective on this, like, okay, how does this really make you feel? Because the people who thought that a tweet like that would make someone that might have been a libertarian now never, ever, ever get involved with the party. And I think that if one state's official Twitter account going after war criminals a little too hard is what's going to be the final straw for you to never join the movement or the party or anything like that, you are going to be a weak ass fucking libertarian anyway. And you're not actually trying to fight the state. You just are like mildly peeved by the state, and like come back when you actually fucking hate it and are ready to get rid of it. And a mean tweet isn't going to scare you away. I do also, like you said, I value like the Amash and Cohen take of like, maybe this is a bridge too far. But I think the reasonable thing to do from someone in that camp is not to do the fun and like instantly gratifying thing, which is clap back at you guys and tell you guys you're being naughty. But you have to, if your problem is this is not going to be received well, then make it be received better and help be that translator to the normies that you think that you're trying to reach. I think that from especially people like Spike and Justin, some kind of like, now I know this might seem a little too much, but let me tell you why they think this is necessary to say. I might agree with you that it's a little too much, but this man is responsible for hundreds of thousands of innocent dead children.
And to be fair, Spike sort of said that in he had a video response and a tweet response, and he never like, it was never like, how dare you, it was just kind of like, I wouldn't do that. I don't think a Libertarian Party official account should do that. But let's be clear, John McCain was a warmongering piece of shit. I mean, I didn't use those exact words, but that was, the best I think we could hope for people like him. What I will say is Libertarian Party New Hampshire shifts the Overton window a lot because you probably remember last year they made a tweet about child labor that Gary Johnson came out and condemned, and all sorts of people came out and condemned. And months later, that basically became law in New Hampshire. The New Hampshire legislature removed most of the child labor laws on the books, and the governor signed it into law, I believe. So that's that's now policy in New Hampshire. And that tweet, Justin O'Donnell made this point. That tweet last year was a 10 on the Richter scale. If we made that exact same tweet right now, it would barely register. It would be like a 4. So it makes me wonder, what are we going to be able to say a year from now and really push the envelope that people won't even recognize this McCain tweet anymore? And I feel like that gives room for people like Justin or Spike or Dave or whoever to not follow us all the way or necessarily back us up all the way. But like you said, to almost even be like, okay, that's a little far from me. I wouldn't have made that tweet. But let's be clear here. This is how awful this person really was. And so the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is like the tip of the spear, the pioneers who are going to take the arrows, whatever. Someone's got to be out in front and actually pushing hard and doing stuff that the national party can't do, or that the presidential candidate can't do, or that the chair of the party can't do necessarily. I don't expect those people to be as aggressive as the people in New Hampshire, but New Hampshire is just a different place. We have a different goal than the rest of the country, and we are affiliated with the Libertarian Party national account, but we don't expect them to back us up on everything. And in return, we don't want them to expect us to keep our messaging as mild as they are.
Yeah. I mean, how hard is it really to pass off all of this bullshit as, come on, guys, it's New Hampshire. What do you expect?
Exactly.
Anyone in the other 49 states will get that, regardless of their political opinions. If you just say, come on, guys, it's New Hampshire, they're nuts.
And that's a compliment to us. If you call us a bunch of crazy renegade extremists, we'll be like, yep. Yep, basically.
And proud of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that something along those lines should be the approach, because it's always more fun to fight internally. It gets more attention, there's more response to it, it's more gratifying always for me to pick a fight with fucking Jacob Winograd, than it is for me to just try to fight the fight and do the thing and just be a team player. Right. He's most likely going to be the next guest on my show. I'm not picking fights with him anytime soon, but just to throw out a name.
I just did a pre-recorded episode with him that I need to listen to again before I decide to air it publicly, because we got into some controversial territory. It was great. I'm great friends with him. We weren't yelling at each other or anything, but we both traveled down some territory that
interesting.
We'll see if it gets posted. I got to listen to it again, but I'll keep you updated on that.
Well, that really makes me want to listen to it.
I know.
But I think the important thing is to keep even if you disagree with someone within the movement, if you're talking to someone outside of the movement, you need to keep the majority of your fight still aimed at the state. You disagree with your brothers and sisters in the movement, but you're fighting the state. You're not arguing or being like, yeah, I know they're so horrible, I would never have done that, isn't that awful, that's why we need you to get involved to help stop this these kind of behavior in the party. That's not a thing. And even vice versa, you can't point at the snobs that are getting annoyed by this tweet and be like, see, this is what we needed to eradicate from the party. That's not helpful. It needs to be, yeah, I understand your frustration, but like the battle is so great that we need these extreme measures, whether that's, being a little flaky in some people's minds and like working with somebody who we think might be less than, but can get us name recognition and get our message out there. Or if it's tweets like this, or talking about really crazy policies like abolishing child labor or the driver's license or not paying your taxes ever. We can be extreme or we can be pragmatic, and I don't know. You and I have always agreed on this part of it, though. Like, we need both. It's always a both and.
Yeah, I re-listened to that episode we did with Dave like a year and a half ago, the first one with you, me, Jeremy, and Dave.
Mhm.
And my opinion on a lot of stuff like really hasn't changed, because we were talking about the Joe Jorgensen Black Lives Matter tweet.
Mhm.
And dude, most people don't know about that. I mean, yeah, it might get brought up if you go on a talk show or something, but the vast majority of the public doesn't even know who Joe Jorgensen is.
Yeah.
Even with all the media attention we got, 99% of the public has no idea who we are, and this tweet will not matter in like 3 weeks. It's all going to get buried by all the other things in the news. Like, I mean, we'll be 10 things away from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's tweet. I think people forget that Twitter is not real life. And as someone who's not allowed on Twitter, like, it's kind of important for people to remember that the world isn't Liberty Twitter. Like, the world doesn't know about the latest podcast between Who's What's It and so. Like, they just don't. They don't know about anything. And so, like, take a fucking chill pill occasionally. So, like, so many people were like, I'm done with the Libertarian Party after this tweet. Like, they've ruined our national image. And it was so similar to people back in 2020 saying the same thing. Like, I'm done with the Libertarian Party after Joe Jorgensen made the Black Lives Matter tweet.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the Black Lives Matter tweet, but I didn't fucking care. It was just like, all right, whatever. Yeah, that's kind of a dumb thing to say, but who cares? And just moved on. And then like 2 months later, people were still bringing it up. And guess what? Everyone who was bringing it up was libertarians. Like, I mean, most people who weren't libertarians didn't know about that. A couple like right-wing podcasters knew about it, but the vast majority of people had no idea and also didn't give a shit. So people who act like this is kneecapping our movement and this is like the end of it, like, just get off Twitter for a few days and go smoke some weed or something.
Yeah, and the only reason that anyone that I've talked to has known about it is because of the Dave Smith and Tom Woodses of the worlds that are reaching out to those would-be libertarians and bringing people in, but chose to use that messaging platform to shit on someone within the party. Like, those people are the only ones that I run into where it's like, actually, like, no thanks, you guys are fucking woke bullshit. If I go into their follows, it is very likely that we share about a dozen, and they're all like the people that were talking shit. Like, and I see the same thing happen on the other side with the like Brianna Coyle and Sasha Cohen's of the world. Like, the people that they're bringing in are not actually coming in anymore, and they're kind of kneecapping themselves by being like, come join this thing that I shit on constantly. and both sides are doing it, and those camps are the only time when I actually see somebody that I might be able to bring into the party and into the movement that I can't now because this dumb bullshit has actually turned them off from the party completely.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, you remember, like, that was a big thing that we were saying in the beginning of 2020 was like, okay, if someone's woke and that's how they bring people to the table, like just ignore them and outdo them yourself, which definitely happened, by the way, in Reno. Like they got ignored and outdone for the most part. And I'd say the same to people who hate the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire. Realize, like, well, the party's a lot bigger than just New Hampshire. And first of all, the National Party hasn't said anything remotely close to the shit we've said. Like, they've said stuff that people find edgy or whatever, but nothing like us. And if you want a more milquetoast party or whatever, like, fine, then join the party and like change it. That's always been the whole point, is like to drive competition. If you don't like what this person is saying, then out hire new libertarians with your messaging or whatever. And I remember, like, the Libertarian Party of Texas, they made some tweet like trans rights or human rights or something, and it got like 60,000 likes, and so many people were angry. God, this is so awful, man. And it's like, all right, well, just go say your thing that's more impressive or is going to garner more attention. And I think ours, even though it didn't get as many likes because people are afraid to like a tweet like that, I bet it got more impressions because of how crazy it went. 15 million impressions. I kind of doubt the tweet from LP Texas got that much attention. So it's like, look, you can go about this one of two ways. You can just complain and bitch and tell people I'm done and quit, and like tell people not to join the party or whatever. Like, I don't really know what that does. I don't really get it. Or you can be like, okay, I'm going to do this instead. Like, I'm going to one up you guys. And that's always been my approach. And the person who is really good on this is actually Larry Sharp. Like, he said it on my show. I was on a Clubhouse meeting with him once. He was like, don't attack other people for how they do their messaging. Like, just do what you're good at. And I am good at what the LP New Hampshire puts out. Like, that's my skill. Like, I can message like Larry too if I wanted to, but it's just not as effective. I'm really good at.
It's also not as much fun.
It's not as much fun, but I love Larry, and I think Larry's really good at what he does, and I would never want him to change. And I just feel like that across the spectrum with the Liberty Movement. Like, everybody's going to be good at something a little bit different. So just have at what you're good at. And that's what, what's so funny is this is all I was on Kyle Matovic's show last night, and we talked about this, and Angela was there too. And so I was saying, look, this might be a sort of controversial statement, but as somebody who has tons of respect and love and admiration for Ron Paul, I don't think we should deify him or act like he is the only thing we should aspire to be, because a lot of people have done that, and I might be guilty of that to some extent too. But Ron Paul, when he was on my show, you know what he said to do? He said, you have to do whatever it is that you do, whatever you're good at, go and be the best at it. And that's all you can do. Like, he wasn't telling people, be like me, emulate me, be the new Ron Paul. He didn't say that. He told me, like, go be what you can be. And that's what I'm doing. And that's what Ron Paul would want us to do. And, I'm not trying to suggest that I'm better than Ron Paul or something. I'm just saying that I'm not Ron Paul, and I can't be Ron Paul. Ron Paul was, a baby doctor who fought in the Vietnam War and then served in Congress for over 20 years and ran for president twice. That's not me. It isn't. Yeah. So I've got to be the best Reed Coverdale I can be. You've got to be the best David Fite you could be. Larry Sharp's got to be the best Larry Sharp he can be. And we're a decentralized movement. We're supposed to be. So this idea that we're like all trying to refine our messaging to be Ron Paul 2.0, I don't think that's right. And I don't think that's what Ron Paul would want either. I mean, he told me as much on his show. I should clip it and put it on Instagram or something and be like, I'm taking Ron Paul's advice. So,
yeah, I think it's really kind of sad that the like machine swamp creature that is, whether you want to say either of the parties or like the deep state itself or whatever, manages to somehow do better at the decentralized movement thing than we do.
Yeah.
It's like, do you think that the chair of the RNC has to answer for every dumb thing Tucker Carlson or a host on OAN says?
Or like the Libertarian Party of the Republican Party of Georgia or Connecticut, or when Marjorie Taylor Greene says something off the wall. Like, yeah, no, of course not.
Yeah, I don't understand why we pretend like it has to be together. I mean, this conversation, I guess, like we are talking about an official party Twitter account, which neither of the other parties would do something like this from an official account.
Of course not. That's why we're based. That's why we're better than them.
So there is a point to be made, I think, in this specific conversation. But for the most part, what you do as, the naturalist capitalist, or even like within the Kaufman campaign or anything else, really no one in the party should have to answer for any of your words or deeds.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on like the latter half of that. But even the former part about, a party affiliate. I mean, imagine if like the Republican Party of Georgia put out some really like anti-Hillary Clinton tweet, or made fun of, did something like on par with what we did. Like, it would get in the news for a few days and then everyone would forget about it. Mm-hmm. And to act like this would kneecap DeSantis running for president in 2024, or Trump or Ted Cruz or whoever, like as if people are going to use that as a gotcha when you get on the stage. Like, well, did you hear what the Republican Party of Georgia said? It would be like, okay, yeah, they did say that. Oh, well, that's Georgia. Yeah. Moving on. Like to act like this is going to matter, I think is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Some people will get butthurt about it, but like, okay, whatever, move along.
Yeah. And to finish playing out that hypothetical, DeSantis would respond on stage with some like mildly amusing, but without turning away any voters within the state, like insult to Georgia. Like he would just like shit on Georgia for a millisecond there, like especially being from Florida.
Yeah, he'd be like, "We want to go to war with Georgia, especially if they elect Stacey Abrams or something like that."
Yeah, and like get every Republican in Georgia to be like, "Fuck yeah," and everyone else that's watching be like, "Oh yeah, no, that's a good, yeah, fuck that." Like it would, he wouldn't. Just to make the point, like he wouldn't backpedal, apologize, or even just like try to dodge it. Like he would probably just show it for the stupidity that it really is. And we don't do that as much as we should either. We kind of allow people to create the drama within our movement just because it's more fun to just like fight as a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't understand what the purpose of trying to create all this cohesion is. Like, I understand, and I agree, by the way, that the old National Libertarian Party was super boring, and I think like the new National Party is more interesting. But ultimately, no one cares is the big thing to remember. Like, when's the last time the GOP Twitter account said something anyone gave a shit about, or the last time the Democrat Twitter account said? So, like, this is the problem. The liberty movement is way too attached to Twitter. It just is. Like, and again, saying this as someone who's banned off Twitter, like, just they need to get out in the real world a little bit more. And they got to get better at deflection, like you're saying. Like, you're not responsible for what Gary Johnson said in 2016 about Aleppo. Like, if that is a hard thing to be like, look, Gary Johnson said that, I'm not Gary Johnson, I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Move along. Like, I don't understand why we feel like we have to answer for everything every libertarian has ever said. The Republicans don't feel that way. Look at Donald Trump with George W. Bush. Like, he shit on his legacy on stage and became the nominee of the party. Mm-hmm. As if you can't do that as a libertarian. Like, look, yeah, Joe Jorgensen was a burnt piece of toast, and Gary Johnson's a nice guy, but he doesn't know much and is kind of an idiot. Like, okay, moving along. So I don't really get it. Why there's so much responsibility that people feel to answer for everything that any libertarian has ever said in history. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. One of them is a burnt piece of toast. The other one is burnt to a toast.
Oh man.
And the thing is, the 90% of voters or just like people and an even larger percent of the people who are ever going to come over to this movement are going to respond positively to that kind of talk. It's like, we love them. They did amazing things for the movement. They brought so many people in. I have so many friends right now, some of my best friends that I owe to one of those two campaigns. That would never have been brought together if they weren't a part of one of those campaigns. But like,
you want to know what's hilarious? You know who like convinced me to join the Libertarian Party?
Who?
Jacob Hornberger. Have I said nice things about Jacob Hornberger since then?
Not really.
No. So it's just like, I don't know. Like, yeah, just throwing that in there. Sorry to sidetrack you there, but
you're good. But yeah, I mean, I think what you're touching on here is honestly we've had this conversation. My main critique of most members of the Mises Caucus is the whole like Twitter isn't real life, and like if what you really want to do is tweet, doing all of this just for control of one Twitter account attached to the National Party, that you could have done so many better things to make so much better of a Twitter account. Like,
agreed.
Y'all could have created 84 different like activists with their own Twitter accounts,
all sorts of things,
and the whole nine, and had 10 times as many followers as the National Party, like all 40 of them. I mean, Dave has more. Matt, or not Matt. What am I talking about?
Dave has more followers than the National Party.
The National Party, right?
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if you surpassed them if you hadn't gotten like banned 82 times.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. So I 100% agree that like Twitter's not real life. If what you want to do is politics, do politics. And there are so many people who want to do politics. If what you want to do is talk about shit, you don't need a party apparatus to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if that really was the entire goal of the Mises Caucus takeover, was to control a Twitter account, then it deserves whatever fate it gets. You know, like I'm hoping that's not all it was, but I think that's what it was for some people, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people are just like, oh my God, the Twitter, it's so much better now. And it's like, okay, cool. The Twitter's better. We just sent 40 billion to Ukraine, 3 days ago. Like, cool. We got a good Twitter account though. These are kind of the agorist critiques that are like spot on. Like I've seen Sal the agorist kind of laughing at Mises Caucus people who are just like fawning over the new Twitter. It's like, yeah, great. The new Twitter is awesome, but okay, so what? We're like in New Hampshire, we have policies that are actually changing. And our goal is to get into media when we say crazy shit. Like it's happened multiple times. Like this wasn't the first time we've made national news. It wasn't the first time that we ruffled a lot of feathers and got people talking about important stuff. So like the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire is in a weird spot because there's no one in the New Hampshire House who is just a libertarian. Nobody. There are some who are both Republican and members of the Libertarian Party. And then there are some who are independents and part of the Libertarian Party, but there's no one who's like a registered libertarian and that's their only affiliation that are in the New Hampshire State House. Like if you want to get into the New Hampshire State House, you just run as a Republican. And by the way, I have no problems with that because the people who are in there as Republicans, they are libertarians and they vote libertarian. But the purpose of the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire is really to like shame the Republican Party into being better, because the Republican Party is where we get our officials elected. And then we have the Libertarian Party as a messaging tool to be like, yo, you guys voted to lower taxes. That's great. Now abolish them or you're a red coat, and it works. Like, it obviously has some effect, as I talked about with the child labor stuff and getting all the attention we have in New Hampshire, calling us an invasive species that needs to be exterminated. Like, we're gaining attention, and that's what we're going to keep doing with it. And I mean, I hope other states start trying to adopt similar tactics, because the Libertarian Party of Minnesota's Twitter account is great. Like they put out a lot of good stuff. But what's going on in Minnesota? And that's an honest question. I don't know. Maybe they are doing some great stuff there. But what's changing in your community? Like what, you know, if it's all about, oh yeah, LP National put out a great tweet today. It's like, okay, so what? You know, that's all like really fruitless in the end.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole purpose behind the Mises Caucus that I was told about was that it's about localism. And if it's about localism, then what we have been doing with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's Twitter account should be 100% approved, right? Because that is localism. We're championing things in New Hampshire and pushing policies through in New Hampshire. That to me is what this was always supposed to be about. So
yeah, there is no reason that we should be trying to tell the other states how they should be messaging to their people. I guess if you're getting critiques from people within the state of New Hampshire, I guess those critiques are somewhat more valid than, and I don't know any LPNH people that aren't Mises. I know many people have left since y'all took over, and I was never friends with any of those people that left. So
yeah, we're glad those people left, by the way.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Just protect your hairs, and
yeah.
So also, since we last talked on the show, you've been bouncing around talking to a lot of people from a stage, which is kind of a newer development in your life. First off, Rev, before we talk about that, how much fun was it to have like Tulsi, Spike, and Dave all in the same room at the same time?
Dave wasn't there, unfortunately, and she actually did ask if he was there because she saw he was speaking and asked. Me and Clint were talking with her, and then I just talked to her for like 5 minutes after that, and she asked us if Dave was there, and we're like, nope. And I guess she really wants to meet him and talk to him because she likes him. But yeah, it was weird, man. The last time I'd seen her was also the last time I saw you, which was February 11th, 2020 in the Victory Hall. You know, like where we got like 7th place or whatever.
I smoked weed with Vermin Supreme that night, so I considered it a victory. I had a victory.
It's funny because I met Vermin Supreme that night, and Spike Cohen was there, and I had no idea who Spike Cohen was. And I even like asked as a joke, like, "Hey, Vermin, who's going to be your running mate?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that guy Spike Cohen over there." I was like, "Oh yeah, great." I didn't. Yeah, that it's funny how things turned out with that. It was weird because I was so used to being with Tulsi and having a libertarian minority at best, if not just me, in a room full of like people who wanted Medicare for all and a higher minimum wage and free college and to ban AR-15s or whatever. So it was just like, it was weird having the tables turned. Now Tulsi's alone with all these libertarians and me. It was just kind of an interesting turn of the tide. And she was speaking to a crowd of libertarians and having to really speak directly to them. And you know this as well as anyone. Tulsi can speak for an hour without saying anything, right? She can do we all must embrace aloha and America and the spirit of God. You know, like she could just go on and on forever with like platitudes. But what? She actually gave a really good speech. It's on YouTube now. And it was a very like specific takedown of Joe Biden and his warmongering and government censorship and everything. It was a really, really good speech. And, you know, when she's doing her mindless kind of, just empty platitudes, it's usually to conservatives. And I think she knew I'm not going to be able to get away with that in this crowd. So I got to speak to them a little bit more directly about policies they care about. And it was really good, but it was interesting to see the tables turned like that because her support base that liked her in 2020 really doesn't like her anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some Tulsocrats who don't know anything about policy and they'll just love Tulsi no matter what. So those people still like her. but you like her broader support base, like the Bernie 2016 people who were like, oh yeah, Tulsi's cool. Like a lot of those people fucking hate her guts now. So it was interesting to see the tables turned.
Yeah, I actually, speaking of Tulsocrats that don't know a whole lot, I got a message on Twitter the other day, which is one of those things that a lot of my friends don't like to believe that exists. Which is one of those people messaging me, and it said, "I've decided to join the Libertarian Party and become a delegate for the convention in 24 to help make sure a Dave Smith presidential run happens."
Wow, there you go. Well, he was just on with Jimmy Dore again. I don't know if you saw that. So.
I didn't see the episode, but I saw that it was happening, and was looking for it.
It was good.
It's gonna be my drive time listen.
Yeah,
next week. Yeah, like a lot of people, I so many of my friends can't believe that like someone that came in from the left would go to that part of the liberty movement. It's like,
you know what's funny? You're not going to be surprised by this, but I'm surprised by it. You know, there definitely is like a libertarian to alt-right pipeline that exists, but to claim that Dave is part of that is just hilarious. Like it's the, if anything, it's the other way. Like if anything, alt-right people watch Dave and then go, all right, this guy's making a little bit of sense. But I think Dave
sir was watching.
Yeah. Yeah, Ronwell's one of the oh, it's this guy. Yeah, no, Ronwell watches like every episode of my show. So
he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I'm not surprised by that at all. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, no, like I think in a weird turn of events, I've become one of the guys who convinces, I might be one of the most prominent guys who convinces alt-right people that they're retarded now.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I never saw myself filling that gap, but I do now. Like more than Dave. Like I think a lot of people think that Dave is that guy, but I don't know. I think it's maybe he has higher numbers just because he has a bigger reach, but per capita, I'd say like I probably bring in the most people like that. And by bring in, I don't mean like tell them, hey, we're going to be cool with like these policies or something if you join. It's more like, no, these policies are retarded and here's why. So I don't know. That's been an interesting development for sure.
Yeah, I very much agree with the idea that like you guys are not part of the libertarian to alt-right pipeline. I don't think I don't think that really anyone currently prominent in the movement is a part of that pipeline. But definitely
I think, oh yeah. You know, I think the biggest part of the libertarian to alt-right pipeline is the super woke people, to be honest, because libertarians who aren't very strong in their libertarian beliefs just get so sick of it that they say, okay, at least these people, you know, want to do something about this or whatever. And to me, like, if you're part of that libertarian to alt-right pipeline, I never considered you much of an ally in the first place. Like, if furries are what destroy your libertarianism, it's like, okay, you probably weren't much of an ally to begin with. So,
right.
Like, if you can't stand up to furries, I don't think you can stand up to the CIA. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, the only way to stop the libertarian to alt-right pipeline is to admit that it exists and then actively try to shut it down, which is what you're saying. I think that you do. I think that Clint does that. I think Dave does that. There are a couple people in that sphere where I think might be net negatives or at least like neutral. They allow the pipeline to stay open by saying, like, I guess the term is dog whistles, but like, you know, allowing some speech to be okay without ever actually like doubling down on it, I guess. I don't know. There's people that operate in a gray space that I think is a lot of the problem. But people like you and Dave are not part of the problem. Ha, get it? Because you aren't saying like, oh, these completely ridiculous racist ideas might be valid. It's like Dave has never once said that like Holocaust denial is like, just like an idea that like we should respect everyone's ideas. Like he's like, no, you're a fucking moron if you're questioning this right now to my face. Really? Like to my face, you're gonna question this. And he shuts it down. And a lot of people don't see that or choose to ignore that and pretend like he's someone that just like hangs out with a bunch of super terrible alt-right people and just strokes their ego. He doesn't. And I think that's why you're right that he's not a part of that he's one of the people bringing people out of that into the liberty movement, making them hate the state instead of the Jews or the Mexicans.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's hilarious that people consider Dave a Nazi. It's like that wouldn't turn out very well for him. But like, I think also, I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And instead of like, so if someone is a Holocaust denier, I think allowing them to talk about it is actually the best thing to do. It's to be like, okay, wait, why do you think this is fake or whatever? And a lot of them you'll find like they're not Holocaust deniers. They just like think one detail or another is exaggerated or something. And if I think when people embrace like outright denial, it's because they're not allowed to touch it. It's kind of like, I know we're on YouTube, so I'm going to be careful how I word this, but the event in which everybody cast a ballot in 2020 for the presidential candidate, I think there were some abnormalities, especially surrounding Hunter Biden's laptop. Like you weren't allowed to talk about that. They purposefully buried that story. So there was definitely rigging to some extent. And there was definitely tipping of the scales purposefully. But when people think that the pieces of paper on which you fill out a bubble to select a candidate, when they think those are manufactured in the middle of the night by the millions or something, and that the event was taken from one candidate and given to another, I think that's a pretty ridiculous sentiment. And I think the reason a lot of people believe that is because they're not even allowed to touch the discussion at all, right? They're not allowed to talk about the Hunter Biden laptop story, or now you are, but you weren't forever. And so people just think, yeah, they fucking took it and gave it to the other guy. And I think you have stuff like that with the Holocaust. You have stuff like that with 9/11, with Israel, like with all these subjects. And my approach has always been, let's talk about it. And let's see like what you don't believe and why you think this didn't exist and why this didn't happen. And to me, that's always been the biggest defusing way to go about any of this stuff. Because if you just tell someone that they're an idiot for thinking what they think, like, it's not really going to get you very far. It's like, okay. Or if you call someone a Nazi or alt-right, especially if they actually are a Nazi, if you just call them a Nazi and that they should be ashamed, like they're not really going to care. So the best way is to like open a discussion about it and frankly, like let them explain their ideology to you. You don't even need to poke holes in it sometimes. You can just be like, okay, how are you going to go about your ethno state? Please describe that process to me. And you just sit back and let them say it. And first of all, most of them won't actually say it because they'll be like, well, like hypothetically, if we were going to do things this way, like we could, they'll just like never
just
actually go for
a teensy bit of genocide.
Yeah, just a little bit. And then if they do like come right out and say it, then they look like idiots to the whole world. It's like, holy shit. So case in point, I think I sent you this Substack about this, but at Freedom Fest, Nick Fuentes, who I don't think is a Nazi, by the way, I just think he's kind of an edgelord, but he was there's this guy Jason Rink who made a video about him that was going to air at Freedom Fest, and so then it was proposed that Nick Fuentes actually come to the screening and then do a Q&A on a panel for the audience afterward. And then this got shot down, and then ultimately the screening of the movie was disallowed, and the thing wasn't screened at Freedom Fest anymore. It was screened at a separate event, still in Vegas nearby. But I went to this event just to see it. And what you had happen, instead of Nick being in front of a group of liberally minded people, lowercase L, like libertarians, people who believe in like freedom of association, blah, blah, whatever. Like, instead of having to answer to a crowd of those people, he was put into a theater where it was him and hundreds of his acolytes, and they had a feeling of righteous indignation because they were banned from being allowed to go to the event. And then it was nothing but an echo chamber where it's him and all his fans telling him what a great, awesome human being he is. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's completely counterproductive. What have you done? Like, you've created a virtue signal that, oh, we're better than this guy or whatever. Like, okay, but now this guy doesn't have to answer in front of like a bunch of critically minded libertarians and liberals or whatever. He's just going to be speaking to a bunch of his friends. And now he and his friends have this boosted feeling of self-righteousness. So what have you accomplished? So I think, if anything, moves like that are what encourage the libertarian to alt-right pipeline, because some libertarians who are on the fence, when they see that type of discussion get shut down and not allowed to happen, they're like, what the heck? I'm going to go like check this out. And then they might be like, okay, well, yeah, this is me. Like, I want to be with the people who are actually a threat, who aren't being allowed to speak. This guy seems like he's more of a threat than Nick Gillespie or whoever's speaking at Freedom Fest. Yeah. And I don't want that to happen. Like, I want that discussion to be open and for people to understand what other people think. And then if they have bad ideas, to ultimately bring sunlight to them and be like, wow, that is kind of nuts and stupid.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Putting him on stage at Freedom Fest would have been a much better, because all of those acolytes still would have been there to watch him get destroyed also. Right. And I think that the exact same mentality is true on the individual level. A person who has gone down the rabbit hole too far, to rewind point slightly. I think the main problem is that all of these rabbit holes that you mentioned, like 9/11, the Holocaust, COVID, even all of these, the Hunter Biden laptop, Epstein, all of these rabbit holes, once they hit a certain depth, become an echo chamber, like 100% echo chamber. Like, you cannot research it far enough. The debunkers and mainstream media don't go past a certain level, and then you hit this place where the craziest bullshit will sound like complete fact to you, because like everything they're telling me is a lie on this specific issue. And really the only way to come out of that is to break that echo chamber somehow. So if you go to your friend and say like, hey, did you hear about Hunter Biden's laptop? And they go like, dude, just shut up. Like, that's not helpful. If they say like, what did you hear about Hunter Biden's laptop? And they let you ramble off the entire mountain of bullshit that you consumed in the last 72 hours of like binge reading and watching YouTube videos, they can be like, okay, maybe 60% of that makes sense. Like, let's unpack other pieces of it. Are you sure that's what you heard? And you can actually break out of that. If you have 2 or 3 decent friends that'll actually help you do that, you can save yourself from going actually down too many of those rabbit holes, which I think is something people like you and me need to make sure we don't do sometimes. Like, I know I've come close, but like, it's just, it's not that hard to just kind of be a little bit of a voice of reason in a nice way, and kind of bring people out of that. And you know, if you let yourself get too far into the Jews are trying to kill us all rabbit hole, like there's no real way to go down that rabbit hole and not end up a Nazi.
Yeah, no, and like the thing with the Hunter Biden laptop, like a lot of the shit we hear about it is true and has been known for a while by some people, but it just wasn't allowed. But then what you have is you have this mountain of bullshit and disinformation that comes out. So I talked to Ben Swan about this. Like, disinformation is a word that gets thrown around all the time, but what it really means is either the government or intelligence agencies or some nefarious group pumping bullshit info into an already like nuclear discussion, right? To completely discredit the entire thing so no one will bother looking into it any further. And this is why I'm not a fan of Alex Jones, because I feel like he fulfills that role perfectly, whether or not it's intentional. So he there's an official narrative that everyone's supposed to believe, but then they also have an official counter narrative that is allowable to believe, right? And I realize they've banned Alex Jones off of everything, but you don't get nearly the vitriol for believing the Alex Jones line of conspiracy as you do for kind of falling somewhere in the middle and saying, hey, some of this is actually true, and you know, you got to look into this more. So Alex Jones has done like nothing to uncover the Epstein story, like almost nothing, right? Like you don't hear about the Les Wexner Foundation from Alex Jones. Like you hear about lizard people, or not lizard people, but like interdimensional demons and, you know, the Bilderbergs and like you hear all this like all this fantastic, like sensationalized bullshit that never puts you on a path down like, whoa, who are these people? What did these people do? Or like with 9/11, you never hear about Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and you know, those hijackers on Flight 77 getting their funding from Saudi Arabia. You never hear about that. All you hear about is like controlled demolition, Building 7, no airplane hit the Pentagon. So all this like intentional counter narrative is designed to also bring you away from the truth. So the official narrative doesn't give you the truth. The official counter narrative doesn't give you the truth. And the truth is somewhere in between, and it's usually uncomfortable for everybody and, you know, kind of complicated. And people don't want that. They want simple, which Inside Job is simple, and It Was a Guy in a Cave is also simple. So I try to really be the guy who tries to find out what's true, and it's usually neither. You know, it's usually somewhere in the middle with just about everything.
Yeah, people want to be able to just believe a source at 100%. And so do we, you know, and we get caught up in that, and it screws us over every once in a while with, you know, like Scott Horton, Dave Smith, or Spike Cohen kind of figure, like every once in a while. And yeah, it's so much easier if you can just be like, okay, this guy, I'm going to listen to him and I'm going to believe everything he says, because he does a lot of thinking and he does most of it for me, like in this context, like, and most of the time that's okay. Like we can let Scott Horton think for us when it comes to foreign policy a good chunk of the time. Like he's going to be right most of the time. But yeah, a lot of people fell into that trap with Alex Jones. And I think you put two things together that I think is important is you're allowed to believe that counter narrative, but you're not allowed to believe it out loud. And so they've combined what you're talking about with setting the precedent for deplatforming and everything else, because there's this terrible, ridiculous counter narrative out there that must be shut down. And us people who are in the middle end up just being accidental collateral damage. Like, oops, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you weren't an alt-right crazy person. We just deleted your account accidentally.
Right. Yeah, because they don't want to draw attention to us, right?
Yeah.
Like
they have to say it's either bots or Alex Jones crazies.
Exactly. Like think of how much attention Alex Jones has garnered versus someone like Mike Rivero or Ryan Dawson or something like that. Like they get like no one knows who those people are. They've been truly depersoned, where Alex Jones brings in like I think something like 30 million every year.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy amounts of money. He's in the news all the time. Like they cover the shit out of it. So to me, it's very obviously not a, it's not something that you're supposed to ignore. They don't want you to ignore Alex Jones. They want you to pay attention to him. And the same with like Loose Change. That movie made it everywhere. Like everyone's seen. I think it's still up on YouTube. I don't think that's something that you weren't allowed to see. It's something you're supposed to think you're not allowed to see. And I think like Holocaust denial falls into this same realm. Like a lot of people know who David Irving, or people who like straight up deny the existence of it or try to apologize for Hitler or whatever. Those people, everyone knows who they are, and they're put on a public stage. The people who have like a more nuanced approach, who say like, look, the Holocaust happened and it was bad, but instead of using it as something to remember so that we don't commit genocides again, it's used as something to justify sweeping everything else under the rug. Or, the connections that Zionist groups had with the Nazis, and exported Jews to Palestine under force. And then, terrorist organizations like Haganah, Zionist groups that like killed a lot of Jews in order to make Israel a state. Like they don't, that stuff nobody knows about. Nobody knows about the Patriot disaster. No one knows about the King David Hotel bombing. Like no one knows any of this stuff. And I think that's the goal. It's either like they want you to fall for like the crazy kook out there shit, or they want you to believe like the official narrative about everything. If you are like really tapping at the truth, I think you will get no attention. Like they just won't, they don't want to draw any attention to you. So you're right. You're kind of the collateral damage that's like swept up along with Alex Jones and Holocaust deniers or whatever else.
So honest opinion, do you think Alex Jones is in on it or accidental?
I really think it's like he's a useful idiot. I mean, if he is like in on it, I guess I wouldn't be 100% surprised, but I think there's an incentive for him to do it. It's not like he has to know about it. They've made it very easy for him to fill that role. So yeah, I don't think he's in on it. I think he's just kind of, following his incentives and doing it on his own. What do you think?
I don't know. I think he might be in on it.
That'd be more interesting if he is. I'm down. I'm down to say that's what I think now.
He's just too perfect, and he really he was the original deep person, deep platform, everything. He's so perfect at what you're talking about, and he is so useless otherwise. Which is really like the level of uselessness is one of the like. Even Trump, who I also genuinely believe was in on it and not a useful idiot, at least did some useful things, like First Step Act, like the fact that he didn't get us into war, which I don't even know if that's really can be thanks to him, but like didn't fuck up there. Like he was at least like all right in a couple of ways that like made it, I don't know, something. But Alex Jones has never really contributed anything useful to the conversation. He's just parroted, like you've said, the approved counter narrative.
Yeah. So like, I'm just gonna Lysander Spooner him, whether he is accomplice to these useful narratives or is too dumb to realize he's enabled them. He has perpetrated these and made them mainstream, and either way, he is unfit to exist, or something like that.
Based. So back.
By the way, Clint is having Alex Jones on tomorrow, and I'm the follow-up episode. We already recorded. He's going to release it after the Alex Jones episode, but we talked about this on the episode I did with Clint. So, but yeah, everyone go subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. He blew up over the last week. He did like several huge appearances, so he's taken off.
Fuck yeah, go Clint. So back to Revolution, YAL Revolution. How did it feel to have like flight, hotel, everything paid for, actually get paid to like stand up on a stage and talk to people? Like officially, you're not an amateur anymore. Like officially.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't profit at all. It was just at cost, but it was pretty cool. YAL has been under fire for some stuff. But I was offered to like run ads for them and stuff, which I actually turned down. But they offered me to come speak. So I was like, sure, why not? Especially with the guest lineup they had for speaking. And I didn't hold it. I didn't like hold back any punches when I was doing the speech. I don't know if you saw the speech I gave, but it was me, Clinton, Mark Claire. I even threw a dancing Israelis comment in the speech, which was pretty based. So, yeah, it was good. It was well received. And yeah, I hope to do more things like that in the future. I did speak at Porcfest as well. And I also was at Freedom Fest, didn't get a speaking spot, but I was, I had a booth and got in for free. So it's starting to happen, which is cool. Being banned off Twitter sucks because, like I said, that is how the Liberty movement operates. And I'd probably have 50, 60,000 followers by now if I hadn't lost my first account. Cause I try to gauge it in comparison with Clint because, and who knows, like things could have changed along the way, but I was like 7,000 behind Clint when I found out who he was. And then by the time I got banned, I was 1,500 behind him. So I think it's fair to say I'd be around the same following he has, which is like over 50,000. So it just kind of sucks that, I don't have that anymore because it doesn't matter how many YouTube subscribers you have, how many Substack readers you have. None of that. They don't care about that. It's just like how many followers you got on Twitter. So it is harder to like draw attention to myself, but people have reached out beyond the Twitter ban and asked me to come. So it's been good.
Nice. Yeah, it was very weird tweeting about this episode and not tagging you.
Yeah. What's amazing is because you remember my first account, it got banned last October. And then I built another account and it was not undercover at all. And it lasted like 9 months, got up to like 15,000 followers and then got banned again. And now I've tried to make a few burners since then. They last 2 or 3 days tops. And it's got to be someone reporting me because the latest one, I didn't even have any links to my show, no pictures of me. I did post a picture of me, Dave DeCamp, and Patrick McFarland. And so someone must have seen that and been like, oh, this is Reed, and reported me, and they got me. So I don't know. I can't really do much.
It's ridiculous. Do you imagine having such little to do with your life that you're like,
yeah, just be a parasite on Twitter. Like, ooh, I'm going to go get this guy, or I'm going to, yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Why? So also in the conversation of fun conventions that you've been to that I missed, Reno happened.
Did.
How is being there for the entirety of it?
The first day was a shit show. Nothing happened. We couldn't even vote on going to lunch in agreement. Like, it was just crazy.
Sounds like an LP convention.
Yeah, but then the second 2 days were a lot of fun. and I voted like straight Mises Caucus on everything. And it was funny because I'm not used to voting for stuff that wins. Like almost every person I've ever voted for has lost. So it's just really weird. Like, oh wow, I actually won. And I know you don't get along well with Josh Smith, but that was actually my biggest goal while I was there, to make sure Josh Smith got in as vice chair, because to me, he's the only guy who, I mean, he stood up for New Hampshire over the last week or two, with the backlash we got. And he's like, nope, they're New Hampshire. Fuck off. Like, who cares? And like Eric Rodsepp seemed like a nice guy. I actually met him at the convention. Don't have anything mean to say about the guy, but I just really wanted someone in there who's like kind of from the Tower Caucus and who is gonna like stand up for the shit posting. So that was my biggest like personal addition, because that was the controversial vote. Like everything else was like 70%. Like Angela won by 70%. Todd Hagopian, Karen Ann Harlos, all those people. Josh, it was like the first vote, it was pretty close. It was like 53 to 47 or something. And then we had to like vote on it 3 or 4 times before we finally got him through. So that was my biggest contribution to the convention. And then met Nick Gillespie in person, which is cool. A lot of people are surprised that I get along with him. And I do. I don't know if he found out I made the New Hampshire tweet. He might not like me as much after that, but we've always gotten along, at least up to this point.
Why wouldn't you guys get along?
I don't know. People are just surprised. Like they think because I'm such a shitlord and he's kind of a more reserved, like regime libertarian type, that he wouldn't like me. But we've gotten along fine. I had met Adam Kokesh already, but I got a great photo with him. It was hilarious. He had like, I don't know how many pounds of weed he was carrying around, this huge bag of weed. And let's see, who else did I meet? I met a ton of people who knew who I was, who listened to my show. Yeah, it was a great time, man. I had a lot of fun. And it was funny. I came across some people who really hate my guts and are really vocal about it on Twitter, and they didn't have anything to say to me to my face. They were actually kind of nice and meek and backed off. And it's like, I'm not that way. Like if I'm a dick to you on Twitter, I'll not like suddenly be super nice to you when I meet you. And, a lot of people act on Twitter the way they wouldn't act in real life. But if people said the shit they say to me on Twitter in real life, I would react the way I do on Twitter. Like that's the difference. Like if you said that shit to me to my face, I would be like, yo, let's, what did you say? So, I don't know. That's interesting. I don't have any respect for people who like talk a ton of shit on Twitter, and then when you meet them, they're like, hey, nice to meet you. How's it going? So
yeah, I guess I'm sometimes guilty of that, but it's really just because like I almost never instigate shit on Twitter. So like if sometimes a back and forth will get heated, and I will say things that like when I run into someone in person, neither one of us are really trying to be heated. So neither one of us actually say shit like that. Which I think is normal and respectable, or not respectable, but we really just need to remember that that's how we are when we're on Twitter, and just not get into the screaming matches and the cursing people out, calling them pieces of shit. It's just not worth the time or the energy.
Yeah.
The movement's too small to fracture over
I
shit.
agree. Yeah, I agree with that. It's big gay. Like we can't. I mean, we got to stand up to big pharma, big big weapons industries, and big gay. Big gay can't drive us apart. So
the big gay.
Oh man.
Oh my god. Yeah, I was sad to miss out on Reno. I was very much looking forward to watching that shit show actually happen in person and not be a delegate. I had multiple states reach out to me and ask me if I wanted to be a delegate because they were having trouble seating people, and I'm like,
yeah,
No, thanks.
No, the Mises Caucus turned out like the whole thing was the party is comprised of those who show up, and we showed up. So
yeah,
sorry, guys.
Congratulations on the win, good sir.
Also, like, you know what I was saying about like the libertarian to alt-right pipeline being from the woke people or whatever. The reason I joined the Mises Caucus is a lot because of just the idiocy of the prags. Like, to me, the Mises Caucus is actually more pragmatic than the prags. Like, the prags, to me, pragmatic means like choosing your battles, what's important at a given time. And to me, that's like the wars, the Fed, the drug war, stuff like that. Like, kind of the fringe issues I don't really care about as much. So just gay for, you know, a lot of people to get upset about them. So case in point, like if you're just an ass, that's going to drive people away for sure.
Yeah. I think so much of the issues within the movement are just difference in sets of priorities. And, you know, I agree with the list that you just set out. I also agree with the people that are like, well, these are the specific issues that are important to my town, and I'm running for town clerk, so I don't really care about the wars right now or shitting on John McCain. I care about like this farming issue or something like that, which I think is actually most of the actual prags, if they were to have had a solid messaging strategy as a caucus, which they didn't, it would have been more stuff like that. Like most of the prags didn't even have a Twitter because they were actually like going to town and city council meetings and like getting shit done. And so like it's the people whose messaging got associated with us are actually most of them not part of our caucus, and the ones that are like still doing the national issues but the fringe ones, that's not pragmatic. Like no one cares about a 2% issue when taxes, wars, and inflation, COVID, like there's significantly more pressing matters.
You know, I think the Mises Caucus, one of the valid criticisms is there are a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. Like, we got ballot access for Jeremy in New Hampshire, but it was close. Like, it took a lot of work. And I guess to get Justin O'Donnell on the ballot back when, like, it was the prags running things in New Hampshire, it took like 2 weeks and they had him ballot access. So that type of thing would have been a valid criticism. And if they had focused on that, maybe things would have turned out differently. If they've been like, look, we like the aggressive messaging that the Mises Caucus is willing to push, but look, these guys don't know what they're doing. They need us. That would have been the perfect, like, liberty unity thing, for lack of a better term. You know, like, look, you guys have the fire, we have the know-how, but instead and I think this is on the fault of the prags. It turned into these guys are a bunch of neo-Nazis who don't have any spot in the liberty movement. And so then it was like, well, fuck you. And, you know, that's speaking from a little bit of personal experience. That's kind of why I went the way I did too. It was like, I mean, calling Dave a neo-Nazi is just so ridiculous. I can't believe people do that. And I know so from some personal stuff that I'm not going to mention on the podcast that he gets more outraged by that type of stuff than I do. Like I have a pretty high tolerance for it. Like it doesn't bug me anymore. I don't agree with it. And I think it's stupid, but I don't get triggered by it. Like he gets more triggered by that stuff than I do. So to call him like alt-right or whatever, it's just so beyond the pale ridiculous.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know very many people who are actually members of the Pragmatic Caucus that did that. Most of them were, you know, either Loser Brigade brand of the Radical Caucus or Audacious Caucus or, you know, one of the other fringe caucuses. Like I said, almost everyone within like places of prominence within the pragmatists didn't have a Twitter account to be calling him a neo-Nazi from. Those people were people that don't matter and aren't involved. So I would somewhat disagree that the like vitriol was from their side, because I think that both groups did the same thing that we were fighting always, and polarized and said, okay, there's like this mythical middle point, and if you're here, you're here, and you're here, and we're just going to treat you all the same and attack all of you based on like the 7 people that suck on either side of that line.
To be fair, though, the true is also the same is also true of the opposite side. Like Pete Quinones is not in the Mises Caucus, and he got a lot of people were like upset because people in the Mises Caucus were friendly toward him, and then the same was also true with pragmatists being friendly toward the outright people or the loser brigade types. So a lot of it was by association that wasn't official, but I think that was a two-way street.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah, a lot of needless bullshit off of like just misunderstandings and mischaracterizations, and now we have this weird, ridiculous, fractured movement that's genuinely going to struggle to get 50 state ballot access in 24, I think.
Yeah,
and
it sucks, man. Like I mean, the funny thing is people ask like, what happened to you? You used to be the unity guy, and it's like, I haven't really changed that much on that subject. Like, I have lost favor with a lot of people that I used to think had thicker backbones than they do. It's mostly been perception, like, of who is on my side and who isn't. But as far as like wanting people who are good at like party functions to stick around, like, I still wish that had happened. Like, I feel like we needlessly lost a lot of good people. Like, you told me about what happened in Pennsylvania, the guy like posting a picture of him with a shotgun saying, I'm ready for the Mises Caucus to show up. And then, I mean, that just needlessly burned a bunch of bridges that guy could have like really been an asset in Pennsylvania. But this fucking stupid bullshit is what, pushed a lot of people out. And I really think we need to, it really comes down to accepting that decentralized movement moniker of being like, look, Justin Amash is not Dave Smith, and Spike Cohen is not Larry Sharp, and Reed Coverdale is not, Clint Russell or whatever. Like, we all have our own.
Really,
approach.
I thought you just like take off the fake headpiece. And
yeah, well, Clint and I are joined at the hip area a lot. We're not technically the same person. Yeah, I just think the stupidity over the unified messaging needs to drop. Like, yes, if we run a presidential campaign, then I think it does matter more. You do need someone who kind of more or less represents the whole movement that we can all get behind to run for president. But as far as like local shit goes or state by state shit goes, it's like, Jesus Christ, guys, we have so many different issues. Like, if someone is like, Isley, we're both friends with her. Like, she's great. And we get a lot of people might be surprised. She and I are very good friends. We get along really well. Met at Freedom Fest both times. I love the shit she puts on Twitter. I've retweeted her from LPNH before, and she's retweeted our stuff. Like, a lot of people might think, wait, but I thought LPNH was a bunch of like alt-right, neo-Nazis, and she was like a crazy prostitute or something. And it's like, well, neither of those are true because you don't know either of us, like you just don't. So I'm all about like decentralized messaging. Go for the issues that you're good at and the messaging that you're good at. It's the only way the libertarian movement is going to advance, because that's what we're all about. When it comes down to it, is difference of lifestyle and whatever not being a huge factor. Like, I want to get along with the Christians and the Satanists and the conservative libertarians and the liberal ones. And I also want people who don't get along to realize that freedom of association is an important building block of our society. Like, I'm willing to talk with anybody and ally with anybody on specific issues. I don't really care what the rest of their views are. And I think we also have like a strange way of quantifying what's acceptable and is unacceptable for us to view as, you know, an evil person. Like I think AOC is a far worse human being than Nick Fuentes. Like, you know, maybe not, or at least like as far as like what she's done in her life. Like Nick Fuentes has said some off-color things here and there. She has voted for policies that kill people.
Yeah.
So in my book, like, and I would happily do a podcast with AOC, and I would happily ally with her on legalizing marijuana, and I would happily take a picture next to her, all that shit. Like, it doesn't bother me. But when I do that with Nick Fuentes, it's the end of the world, you know? So I think it's just interesting how people look at all this shit. And my attempt is to kind of break that down and destroy it and kind of rebuild a new idea of what's acceptable to talk about and what's acceptable to ally with people on about. And like, you know, because I think it's very skewed and ridiculous. And it's the only way I really see the liberty movement advancing in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I short anecdotal story on the topic of the freedom of association thing kind of like hit home this year for me. There's a person in the New York State Party. I'll actually say his name, Chris Alinsky. Has caused a lot of problems for me and my friends, and just like the party and a lot of things. He's a very not nice person most of the time, and is actually a lot of the reason why some of the people that hate the Mises Caucus, at least in the Northeast, do, because he was once a member in the earlier days before they even really policed anybody, and somehow was almost the state coordinator for a little bit, and turned a lot of people off. But I stopped really being that involved with the New York State Party and pretty much erased this guy from my mind. And you know, the phrase like living rent free, like, yeah, he didn't anymore. And I went back to New York to work on Larry Sharp's campaign for about 3 weeks, and ended up in a hotel room with this guy binding the petitions at the end of the petitioning drive. There's like 8 of us in this hotel room, like putting everything together. He's sitting right next to me doing this stuff. And like, you know, he's been working within the party, doing stuff, accomplishing things, helping people, being a useful person, and not causing me any grief at all. And we're just both existing. And it's that fucking simple to just don't exist with them if you don't want to. It's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, dude, like, I still see some of the stuff Archie says on Twitter through LPNH, and the only reason I'll go look at it is if I want to laugh, because it's funny. Like, the people who are still, and like I still talk to Dave about this, or I haven't for a while, but we did a lot. Like, Dave, just don't argue with these people. Like, fuck them. Who cares? You're way out of their league. Like, don't even bother. Like, if people who like can't get beyond caring about like bottom feeders, it's just like, dude, there's way bigger fish to fry, you know? And that's something a lot of people still really aren't good at. Because like, we're going to have, if we ever become a viable threat nationwide, we're going to have the media coming after us, and, you know, the intelligence agencies and stuff. And so if we can't get past Archie Flower or the Fakertarians or something, it's like, we're not going to do well, you know? So like, I only ever look at those people if I want to laugh about something, or like, I'm in a group on Facebook called like Libertarian Organization, or I forget, Libertarian Discussion or something like that. And 2/3 of it is people complaining about something somebody said. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, who cares? So yeah, get off Twitter. And if you're not on Twitter, get off Facebook, and, you know, smell the roses a little bit and get out in the real world and realize what is like actually happening out there.
Go do something. Like, I've found that like find a specific bill that actually is going to do something. It's not just like a for show bill that somebody wrote just to die. that's happening in your state legislature and like care about it and like get involved. It's not like there's always going to be an organization lobbying for it, politicians that need help pushing it, and there's always a bill going through your state that's like semi-libertarian-ish.
Yeah.
Make it actually happen. And
Yeah.
those connections and the experience that you gain doing that is how we actually like have a useful movement full of people that know what the fuck they're doing instead of us.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And ultimately, the only thing you can really control is yourself. You know, like so many libertarians are similar to democratic socialists who like sit in their parents' basements and just say, oh, if XYZ were different, I'd be successful. So with socialists, it's like, oh, if we had Medicare for all, oh, if we had a higher minimum wage, blah, 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 I'd finally be able to be successful. With libertarians, it's, oh, if they'd abolish the Federal Reserve, oh, if they would, you know, stop taxing me and taking my money, I'd be able to finally function in society. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think if you don't function in this society, even though there are those drags for sure, like taxes and inflation and shit, like, probably not going to make it without it too, you know, like it's pretty like regardless of whatever outside forces are crushing you, it's ultimately up to you to make your own situation better.
If you're sitting at home and you're watching this and you fall into that category where you're sitting in somebody's basement saying like, oh, if only they weren't taxing a third of my paycheck, I would actually be able to like dig my way out of this hole. Refile your W-2 or get a job that's a 1099 or pays cash. Don't pay your taxes.
Right.
For at least a year. And that should be plenty of time to prove yourself right and or wrong. And in that time, you will have been a better human because you won't be working to help murder children.
Yeah. 100%, man. Like there are ways around it. And ultimately, if you can't figure it out, if you can't figure out how to make your own life better, that's regardless of what outside forces there are, it's ultimately on you because people in the past have had a lot more they've had to overcome than you ever will. So yeah, it ultimately comes down to you and what you're willing to do.
Amen. So Reed, with you being off Twitter, how can people find you, support you, help you grow and become the most successful shitposting podcaster?
Yeah, YouTube has really put the screws to me over the last several months. I mean, I was on target to reach 10,000 subscribers in April, or actually, yeah, in April, and I have been stuck at 9.7 since April.
Wow.
And it's sometimes 9.75, 9.76, then drops back down to 9.75, 9.74. And I used to be getting like 2,000 views per episode just on YouTube. Now I'm like lucky if I break 600. And there hasn't been a strong change in messaging. I mean, maybe I did have like a ton of truck driver fans who stopped watching once I stopped driving, which I am going to start doing again soon. But I don't know, something's going on, and people have messaged me saying that YouTube unsubscribed them from me without them actually doing it. They're not getting notifications on their phone when I go live, etc. Which, you know, it stands to reason with the trend and how the videos just aren't getting the traction they're getting. Now I'm getting like 1,000 to 2,000 listens on audio podcasts. So I was getting like 4,000 pretty regularly across everything. And then if I had a good episode, it would get up to like 10,000. But, you know, yeah, it sucks. So I don't know what's going on with YouTube, but subscribe to me on YouTube, hit the bell. But don't just do YouTube, do Odyssey too. And Rumble. I'm new on Rumble now.
Nice.
I've transferred everything from YouTube over to Rumble. So, and I'm going to start live streaming there as well. I'm going to try to be live streaming on Odyssey and on Rumble and on YouTube every time I go live. And I have a Substack. Make sure you subscribe to that. It's Substack /Reed Coverdale. and it's going well. I've got almost 500 subscribers there now, reading
Nice.
the articles I'm putting out, and yeah, I'm on. If you just go to my Linktree, read Coverdale Linktree, you'll find all my platforms, and follow LP New Hampshire on Twitter at LPNH for more fire,
Fuck
more
yeah.
controversy.
Oh, there's never a dull moment in the LPNH
Never.
Twitter feed. Well, Reed, thank you so much for your time. It has been too long, and it's always good to catch up.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks for having me on. We'll get you over on the Naturalist Capitalist.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We will be back with Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchies host Jacob Winograd in a couple days. I need to nail down a date. We haven't actually done that yet. It's going to be the next episode. Until then, keep up the fight.
Shut up and sit down.